Hey everyone, this is Matt Perez with LearnSolidWorks.com, and in this video series we're going to be creating a light bulb. So the first thing we want to do is we want to start by creating a part. In this case we're going to use metric. We're going to start a sketch on the front plane, go to Tools, Sketch Tools, and down to Sketch Picture. We're going to insert an image of a light bulb. Now in this case, I don't really care what the scale is, but I just want to make sure that the light bulb base is roughly centered at the origin. We want to go ahead and use full image transparency and take it down to between 50 and 60%. Then I'm going to say OK and keep this original sketch just as my reference. So next, I want to sketch again on the front plane. Now we're going to be creating this light bulb in two pieces. We're going to be creating the glass section and then the metal section at the bottom. So let's go ahead and start by creating a reference line from the base. In this case, it's going to go up 375 millimeters. And again, we're not concerned with scale here. We're just trying to get the geometry right. Then we'll take a second line, and this one's going to go up 990 millimeters. So these two reference lines give us a good reference location for this geometry. Now, depending on which one you want to start first, you can either approach the metal part or approach the glass part. Now, for me, I want to take care of the glass part because it's going to have some spline geometry and some additional references here. You can also determine now if you want to create this with surfaces or solids. Now, the base is going to be best done with solids at first because we're going to be creating a solid geometry and then removing material for the threads. But of course, we could also do it as surfaces and use some trim tools. The process you use will be exactly the same, just determines whether or not you're doing something like a sweep cut or if you're creating surfaces and using the trim tools. So let's get started by creating the light bulb. I'm going to start with another reference line coming from the top out to the left. Its distance doesn't really matter, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it into a construction line. And then we want to create this geometry with a spline. We're going to use a horizontal line that brings us out to 180 millimeters. And this one is not going to be a construction line because this will be part of the actual revolve. And then we want to use a spline. Now, depending on which version of SOLIDWORKS you have, you should have a style spline if you've been using, I believe, at least 2014 or newer. If you don't, the process can be done with a standard spline as well, just a different way to control them. Now, if you use a standard spline, you want to simply come in and place a few reference points and connect it down to the bottom. Now, the important thing here you want to do is you want to come in and make a tangent relation with this horizontal line. So that means when we do a revolve, we don't have a point or a degenerate area at the top, and then we simply move the points around until we get a pretty good representation of that. So you see it just takes a little bit of work moving these in and out until we get a pretty good reference for our, in this case, our light bulb. Now, if you're using a style spline, when you do this process, the control is just a little bit different. The reason using something like a style spline is nice is because it allows you to take these reference handles and make them collinear, and that takes care of the curvature into and out of an area. So it's basically going from tangent, which is considered a first order, then we can add second and third order to the curves here. So if we take this third line out, we make it collinear, we have a much nicer set of curves in terms of the curvature coming into and out of this area by using multiple collinear lines to control it. Now again, it really depends on which version of SOLIDWORKS you're using. I'm going to go ahead and stick with the standard spline just because everybody will have access to that. So let's go ahead and exit this sketch and try to do a revolve. Now we might get an error because we have a non-construction line down here, but SOLIDWORKS is pretty good at letting you select the contour and then select the axis of revolution, and then we can create that geometry. So right now we've created the revolve for the light bulb section. Now of course this is thin glass and we could have done it as a surface and thickened it, but I like to approach this by doing it as a solid and using a shell of a very small amount. In this case, I'm going to show a preview, and we're going to shell it down to 1 millimeter. So very thin, especially given the size that we're working with. If you're not drawing it to scale like me, then we could actually increase this up to, let's say, 5 millimeters and give a fairly realistic thickness. Looking at a section view, you can see that that's still pretty thin. And if you have issues with the inside and the outside not matching, you can go up to your system options, to document properties, image quality, and make sure that this slider is cranked up because that'll increase the resolution of arcs and circular edges. Now we can see the inside and outside pretty well. Let's go ahead and rebuild the shell, makes it a little bit thicker, and now I know that the curvature is pretty good. So now we have the glass section. We can apply a material to it if we want by expanding this display pane. We can go ahead and add an appearance, go down to glass, gloss, and add clear. So you notice that right now the feature shell is selected. What we want to do is actually select the body to make sure that it's applied to the entire solid body. Now we can't really tell that it's clear until you rotate it and you can actually see that bottom edge. But if we add anything to the inside, we'll be able to tell. Next, we're going to do a secondary sketch on the front plane. Now remember that our reference, in this case in sketch 2, we can go ahead and show that. We're going to take this line and use convert entities and just bring it into our current sketch and then hide it again. So now that we know that we're going up to the appropriate edge here, we can draw some more reference lines. We're going to come over, down, and we can taper over. I'm going to add a little bit of a step here, taper down, and come back over. And again, dimensions are important whenever you're drawing anything here, but we're not too concerned with specifics here. I just want to make sure that we have nice round numbers. We'll go ahead and add a 145-degree taper here, a small step of 30 millimeters. And the last thing is really just controlling this height here. We'll go ahead and add one more dimension, let's say 50. Don't worry too much about these dimensions, just try to make sure you have a fully defined sketch. Now we can take this, we'll do a revolve, select this as our axis, but make sure that you deselect merge results. We're going to keep this as a separate body. We don't want to add any additional properties to it. And notice that everything in this model is glass. We can expand the solid bodies folder. We can change just the material for shell. We'll go into gloss glass. We'll turn that one in. We'll right click on the appearance at the top level and we'll remove it. So this keeps the default gray. The next thing that we need to do is remove some threads from this body. All right, so in order to do this, we can handle it a few different ways. The easiest way is to do a sweep cut. We could also go in and add a helix, add some additional reference planes, but realistically, it just takes a little bit too much time. So for what we're doing here, I'm going to go back to sketch 2 and show this because it has a reference edge here for us. And that reference edge is going to be important. We're going to need it one more time. I'm going to grab it. I'm going to convert entities with a quick key that I have, and I can hide sketch 2. So now you can see we still have that reference in there. The next thing that I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to sketch again on the front plane, and I'm going to use a circle. And I'm going to look at this image and I'm going to try to place this circle roughly where it needs to be. And I'm going to make it 26 millimeters. Now notice that this circle is not on this edge. And I don't want it to be on this edge because it's actually tapering out as we look at the geometry that's cut away from it. So I want it to be just outside that edge, but I don't really have a reference for where it is. Of course, we did this as a revolve, so we can turn that sketch on and we can use it. But if you didn't, we can go to convert entities, go to intersection curve, and select this face, and it'll automatically slice that geometry for us. So as we're looking at it, we want to make sure that we delete the one on the left side, and the one on the right side, we're going to turn into construction. Go back to a normal to view. We're going to give this a dimension, and we can go from this edge. We want to make sure that's 1 millimeter outside of it. And then from the point up top, we're going to put it at 55 millimeters. All right, next thing that we want to do, with that still selected, we're going to go into a sweep cut. We're going to sweep this along that vertical reference line. And under options, we're going to do twist along path. And remember, this is the path here. We're going to twist along path, and we're going to do by the number of turns. In this case, we're going to do 3 full revolutions. Now notice what's happening. It's doing this based on the entire distance of this path. And that doesn't really work for us because we don't need the threads to go that far. So seeing this, we can go back into Sketch 4. Now remember, this sketch is one that we did convert entities on, but we can bring in some additional references where we want the threads to stop and start and make this a construction line. So I'm going to start it at this point, and I want to drag it just past this edge. So I'm going to give this a vertical height of 200 millimeters, and I want to dimension it from this top edge here, and I'm going to make it 55 millimeters down. Remember, that's where the center of that starts. So now back to Sketch 5, we're going to do a sweep cut one more time. The path is the shorter line. The option, again, is twist along path by number of turns. Let's go ahead and put 4 turns in. So now that looks a little bit more realistic. If we can do 3 turns or 5 turns, depending on what the thread pitch of your specific design is and the size of this. So everything looks pretty good. It comes just past the bottom here. If we want to extend that line a little bit more, we can certainly do that. Let's go ahead and say OK. So you can see here the reason why we might want to extend it past is because of the way that that thread starts. So we can go back into Sketch 4. We can double click on it and make this 220 millimeters and rebuild that. And it'll take the thread cut past the end of it. You see how it has a nice taper off section here. All right, so as we're looking at this, let's go back to a front view. And on Sketch 5, let's say that we actually want to make this a bit bigger. So let's say that this really needs to be 32 millimeters. We'll rebuild it on the screen here. That looks pretty good. The next thing that we want to do is we want to take a look at adding some fillets to this. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to fillet this edge. We're going to fillet this edge. And let's go ahead and try to fillet this internal edge as well. And notice that it fails there. So let's go ahead and remove that edge. We'll OK this fillet. And then we can come back and take care of this one after the fact. So typically when you look at the thread on a light bulb, it's not going to end at a flat here. It will taper back out because it is a stamped section. So depending on the geometry that you need, you might need to take that out just a little bit past the geometry. But in this case, we're not too worried about it. If we roll back before that fillet, or if we delete that fillet, you could do this a few different ways. We could sketch on this face. We could grab these edges and do, or this entire face actually, and do a convert entities. So inside of a sketch on this face, go ahead and use convert entities. And then we can take this as an extrude cut. You can drag it all the way out till it goes out of the body. And what we've done is we've blended the end of that taper off. All right, so now we don't have to put a fillet on that edge. Might look a little bit more realistic to what a light bulb looks like. So as we're looking at this, we could apply a few more fillets, maybe put some mild rounds on here and say OK. And let's go ahead, insert features, and down to the dome tool. Grab the bottom of this and just put a slight dome with a 10 millimeter radius. Put elliptical dome on there and say OK. So now we've added the small contact on the end of it. Now, of course, this isn't perfectly complete because it hasn't been lit up. Now, if you want to get into complete details, we can draw a filament, we can draw all the other information in there. And let's go ahead and just really quick, we're just going to add something inside here. I'm not going to draw a complete filament because honestly, if you're doing something like that, most likely it's just going to be a waste of time. There are better ways for us to handle actually having this look like a light bulb. But I'll just add something in here. I'm going to go to my appearances, and under appearances, if we look in these folders, we have one that's called light. You've got area light, you've got LED, you've got neon tube, and And what we can do is we can actually apply a light material to these. Let's go ahead and give it a red material. So that way, if we turn on our add-in for PhotoView 360, and we take a look at a preview render of this, it'll actually look like it's emitting light from inside of the light bulb. Now, of course, something like this with a green clear glass on it, again, these things might not be realistic, but it all depends on what the situation that you're trying to replicate is. Ideally, what you would want to do is come into View, Lights and Cameras, and add a point light. Now, point light will be a single light inside of here, and that single light, which currently is down here, but if we put it up here, make sure that it's at 0 in Z. So if we look at it from a top view, it looks like it's in the light bulb. We'll make sure that it's 0 in X, and we're only moving it up, in this case, 950 millimeters in Y. We're going to make sure that it's on in PhotoView 360, and now we can modify its brightness. If you want it to be, let's say, 5 here, we can add shadows, add fog. And then if we look at a preview, we'll go ahead and we'll throw this into a dark scene. Go ahead and put it in a completely black scene. Look at a preview of this. It's now going to be emitting light directly from the center of the light bulb using that point light. And of course, the reflections, the scene around you, all the additional information, it all comes from the specific properties that you put in here. And that's a bit outside of what we're really looking to do. We really want to focus on actually coming in and modeling that geometry. So you can see here now we have the light bulb render starting to come through. We can see a bit of the threads going on down here and a light emitting from inside of the glass. So as we look at that, let's go back up to View, Lights and Cameras, Properties for our point light. Make sure that we keep this light when the scene changes. That way we can modify our scene, put it in a little bit brighter scene, and get a better idea of what's going on. So that in general is a way that we would create a light bulb. We can obviously spend a lot of time manipulating the glass material, manipulating the light material, modifying these properties. And it can take you down a very deep hole of different things. Now, if you're actually looking at creating a light bulb for aesthetics, this is perfect for you. If you're actually trying to create it for emitting light on something, it's probably too much time invested because it takes a lot of extra time inside of renders to do that sort of thing. But we have a realistic looking light bulb, and hope you learned a few things in the modeling process of how we were creating that geometry and apply that to your specific models. Well, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this video and would love to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts or suggestions for other videos in the comment box below. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and visit learnsolidworks.com for more SOLIDWORKS tips, tricks, and tutorials.